As you heard earlier, information released to RNZ News shows that almost 10% of ratepayers in the Queenstown Lakes area have supplied an overseas address as their main point of contact. Of the 25,000 ratepayers, 2,100 have overseas addresses. While some will be New Zealanders living abroad, these are officially foreign buyers because they do live overseas. This figure, almost 10%, is 3 times the figure of 3% released by Land Information earlier this week. Now, it comes as Queenstown faces a worsening accommodation crisis, particularly for low-income service workers looking for rooms to rent. Later in Checkpoint, we'll speak to a tenant paying $175 a week to share a house with 10 others, 1 bathroom. We'll hear from a tenant sharing his house with 25 others, and we'll also hear from his landlord. But first, let's go to our Queenstown reporter, Peter Newport, who got those figures showing 10% of properties in Queenstown are owned by people living somewhere other than in New Zealand. And there's a strong belief in Queenstown that even that figure understates the case.
There is, John. I mean, this is very hard to prove because, as you know, there's no proper database of overseas ownership. But just talking to rental agents around town and real estate agents, I mean, one of them said to me that a few years back when she was renting properties up in Fern Hill, which is a sort of middle market suburb just out of town, she felt then that the overseas ownership in that area was up to 50%. On the other side of the spectrum, there are suburbs, new suburbs like Shotover Country and the Lake Hayes Estate. These are mainly, originally they were $400,000 or $500,000 houses. My guess is that most of those houses, 99% of those houses would be New Zealand owner occupied. And Dalefield out of town, where there's properties of 10 million or 15 million, that might be 60 or 70% overseas. But certainly the council evidence, the council data gives us perhaps the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, this is a fascinating story, Queenstown, because there are an awful lot of people there earning not great salaries. They're service workers, so they're serving coffees, they're serving drinks, they're tidying hotel rooms, they're earning somewhere between $15 and $20 an hour. Accommodation costs are so high, as you detailed on Checkpoint yesterday. What has been the response to your story in Queenstown?
Well, John, we've had literally hundreds of messages through social media. I'd just like to make one point before we go into those. You mentioned the salaries. In Auckland, the ratio of income to property is about 9%, which is, it's very high on the global scale. Down here in Queenstown, salaries are lower than in Auckland. So we have a 10.5 ratio. In other words, the average property price is 10.5 times what people earn. But just to illustrate the human effect of that, the reaction to the story that we did, lots of messages, people giving me their names but asking that I don't use them on air, but people telling me stories of cupboards being rented out at $160 a week, more people sharing rooms like we saw yesterday with just sheets dividing them. Even one heartbreaking story of a couple who were barely able to afford their property, and then they had a baby, and the landlord wanted to charge them extra for the newborn baby.
There's another aspect to all of this, although gosh, it would make a contribution, and that is up to 1/3 of houses in Queenstown are empty.
That's true, and again, John, living here, I can tell you I see this all the time. Often the house next door can be empty for 51 weeks of the year because the people that own it don't want the hassle of renting it out. They don't need the money, so they just choose to keep the house locked up. So up to 1/3 of all houses in Queenstown at any given time can be empty for that reason.
And empty land as well, Peter.
Yes, the council have given us data. Over 400 properties, 400 sections are paying rates, but there's no house on that land. So we're seeing evidence here. There's no penalty under the present tax system to just sit on land. There's no, as you know, capital gains tax. So we don't only see people paying rates on empty land, we see lots of development plots quite near to the town centre just sitting empty because, frankly, the owners can make a lot of money just sitting there and doing nothing.